What is up, everybody? Welcome to the God's Heart, Your Part podcast. I am so excited that you are tuning in. Thank you so much. A couple quick things before we get into it. First off, if there are any specific things you want to hear talked about on the podcast, would you let us know? Reach out to us on Instagram at God's Heart, Your Part podcast. If you'd also like access to exclusive content, we got that for you on our Patreon, so check that out. It'll be well worth your time. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's learn from today's episode together. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the God's Heart, Your Part podcast, where we are all about equipping and inspiring next generation leaders to be all that God has created them to be. Hey, I am really excited for today's guest in today's episode. I want to talk about money and talk about finances because it impacts each and every one of us. And so I'm bringing on somebody who I would call an expert in the field. Somebody who is one of my best friends, somebody who has come alongside my wife and I over the years and who we've got to know and love. He's our pastor, a friend, an incredible leader, and great with money. Would y'all help me welcome Pastor Ed Newell to the podcast? Ed, how are you?
I'm good, Brandon. Good. Happy to be here. We see each other every day and are talking constantly, so this is just another extension.
It's just another conversation. But we actually did not talk today, so here we go. We were both off today.
That's a good point. Yeah, did we text at all? No, I don't know.
I don't think that we did.
Left each other alone today.
I know, we had to keep the streak going, so here we are. So I gave my short little intro of who you are, but for everybody out there who may not know you very well, tell us, who is Ed Newell?
Man, I'm certainly not an expert with money.
Oh, please.
you could have invited actual financial experts, financial advisors, a CPA, anybody that probably would have been better than me.
Real quick, let me rephrase it. You are an expert as a common man who does not specialize in finances.
An expert as a common man who does not specialize. I'll agree with that.
There we go.
Yeah. No, man, I'm a 35 dad, husband. Yeah. Got 2 kids. I'm a pastor. That's what I do full time in full-time vocational ministry, and I'm your boss.
You are Brandon Major's boss
during the week, during your 9 to 5.
Would you say that that's what you're most well known for? Being Major's boss?
That's how I normally introduce myself.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Brandon Major? I'm his boss.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, I don't know what else to say. My wife and I, probably our number one hobby is traveling.
Yeah.
And I mean, this kind of opens the door to everything we want to talk about, because I remember when we hit our 5-year wedding anniversary, we were sitting down and kind of just reminiscing about all things marriage, like what's worked, what's not worked, what do we want to do more of, what do we want to do less of, and I remember sitting in our kitchen and talking about wanting to travel more, and we both work for the church and we're happy with our incomes. We're not disappointed with our income, but the amount of money we make only really allowed for one trip a year. That would be, maybe to the beach for a few days, maybe down to Florida.
Yeah.
Her parents live in Florida, so we have some accommodations there, but we didn't have the type of money to do the type of expense trips that we really wanted to do. And that really that was the most recent season where we really buckled down with some of our finances. But I feel like I've been trying to manage my money well since I was 18. And that really set me up in different seasons to get married and do certain things. And that 5-year anniversary mark really took it to a next level where he said, okay, we're really going to be super strict with how we budget and how we spend money, and so that we can do things that not everyone gets to do.
Yeah, no, that's really good. One of the things that I don't know if I've actually told you this after 5 years of friendship, but how you steward and manage money is one of the things I do genuinely really look up to you for. And one of the reasons why is because, you know this, I grew up in a Dave Ramsey household, right? Mm-hmm. Where we would joke and call my dad Dave, right? He loved Dave and he taught us all the things.
Did your parents do the envelopes?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I had a piggy bank and it had 3 slots, but yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that, and I love that. But my dad's in a different field than I went into. And so it was really cool for me, being young in ministry. I think whenever I first joined the team with you, I was 19, 20, somewhere in there. And it was really cool for me to see somebody else who was in my same kind of field and kind of following in a lot of ways in your steps, as we joke about a lot. We have a lot of overlap in our story. You're just about a few years ahead of me. And so to see somebody who's like there, who also is like on the same financial wavelength, was really cool for me and really inspiring. And I remember times of us talking about budgets and money, and I've seen you counsel people, whether they took the advice or not, it was up to them, but I've seen you sit down and you'll open up your finances, and I mean, to a degree, and you'll be transparent and say, well, here's how I do it. And so I always thought that was really, really beautiful. Let me ask you this to kick off kind of our conversation. Why, big picture, answer it however you want. Why does money matter? And specifically, like, think towards younger people, right? They're just spending, and they're like having fun. Why does it matter, even from a young age, to start to steward and save and handle money in an appropriate way?
Yeah, to some degree, I feel like that answer is obvious, right? Like we all want to not have to worry about finances. We all have certain goals in life. We all have certain things that bring us joy, bring us pleasure, travel, spending, hobbies, whatever you want to do. And we always want to be in a place where we have enough to do that and not have to worry about that. If obviously, being people of faith, we also believe that God, every good gift comes from our Heavenly Father, right? So He's constantly pouring blessing in our lives and calls us to be a conduit of blessing. And so even in order to do that, you have to be stewarding your finances well. You got to steward your money well, right? And you got to learn how to, what money, when it comes into my life, I got to figure out how to responsibly handle it, right? Obviously, God calls us to give the first fruits, which we would believe to give the first 10% of our income. We give it back to God, the tithe, right? Yeah. We believe that's kind of a foundational principle that should be the bedrock of your entire budget, of your entire financial perspective. And I really believe that giving that 10% allows the 90 to fall into place. But that is a really stretching decision. That is a really difficult thing for people to do, especially if you didn't grow up being generous or didn't grow up giving to your local church. But there's this reality that if we don't steward it well, like if we don't tell our money where to go, our bank account will tell us where our money went. Right? We can decide on the front end, here's where my money is going to go. Or we have no plan. We just go about our day, spending when we want, when we feel like it, what feels good in the moment. And at the end of the month, you're going to find out where your money went. And it's probably not, it probably will be a stark reality that it did not go ultimately to the places that you wanted it. You would have wanted it to go.
No, that's really helpful. I one of the coolest things I thought that you ever really showed me was, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, we can cut it out if not, but you actually have like a byline, if you will, in your budget that's just for blessing others. And this is like, this is a fund that it's not necessarily like, obviously you have your normal giving and you have the things that are like monthly that you support or whatever that looks like. But then you have an addition, kind of like a benevolence fund of blessing to give to people or to treat people to something. And I thought that was so cool, but you can't do that unless you're actually planning and strategizing where the money goes.
Yeah. I mean, that's like I would say that's next level for people to actually plan for your generosity. Obviously you do that with the tithe, like you have the 10%. And then if you have any other initiatives that you're giving to or being generous to, like that would be in addition to the tithe. For us, we have like Compassion Children, we're sponsoring the other side of the world. But then, it's like I would get in these circumstances where I'm taking people out to coffee, maybe you, and I want to cover your coffee.
Thank you.
And then I'd get, then I'd end up looking at my finances at the end of the month and thinking, I wanted to be generous in that moment, but I don't know where to account for this money. And so then I have to take it from somewhere, right? I have to take it from my grocery budget. I got to take it from, I don't know, whatever other line item you have in your budget, which, let's be honest, not everyone has a budget. That's like step one. But so I was like, I'm just going to build it in. And so I just put in a line in my budget called generosity, and it fluctuates in different amounts. And sometimes I go over it and sometimes I go under, but that happens in all my different line items. As long as the top number is good, I make it out of the month. Okay.
So, 100%. That's really good. So budgeting, again, this, most of the viewers of this are probably going to be younger, right?
Yeah.
And, may or may not know a lot about how to write out a budget or plan, or maybe their income's fluctuating. So whether for right now, maybe, or in a couple years, what's like some budgeting 101 advice from Ed Newell that you would give to them?
The very first thing I would say is don't convince yourself that you don't need a budget. I think sometimes we often think, well, I don't need a budget. I can handle my money. I'll just go with the flow, and like I'll be able to figure it out, right? As long as I got money in my bank account, I'll be good. Or as long as I got cash in my wallet, I'm going to be good. Yeah. And we convince ourselves we don't need a budget. We also tend to believe that, well, the other people in my life don't have a budget, so why do I need one? And that's half true. Some people don't have a budget, and if you actually dug into their finances, they're probably not as well off as they would like. Yes, we all know that there are people that are far well off in finances. Maybe they don't need a budget because they don't have to think about spending it all, right? But I would argue that the majority of people that you see in your life who are middle class, average middle class, whatever, maybe slightly upper middle class, who are managing their life well, are doing so because they have a budget, because they have sat down at one point to write out, here's how much I make, here are my expenses, and figure that out on an average monthly basis, spread it out over the year, and say, this is how I'm going to spend my money. And if those expenses are too high, you got to figure out how to adjust those expenses, or you got to figure out how to make more money. Those are your only two options. So you actually have to sit down. In marriage, too many couples, I know far too many couples who don't have a budget because they just feel awkward talking about money. They just don't want to sit down and do it because it's not the most fun conversation. Yeah. But when you have that conversation and when you get on the other side of it, it really does allow you to operate in freedom within yourself and within your marriage, and not having to worry about, are we going to have enough to cover the things we want to do? Yeah. And more so, are we going to have enough to then do some of the fun things that we really want to do? So that's kind of a philosophical side. Have a budget. Don't convince yourself you don't need one. Don't convince yourself other people don't have one. Have a budget. Even if no one else had a budget, have a budget. Jesus called us to live different than the world. If the world says just spend however you want and do whatever, okay, live opposite of that. All right? Yeah. I think this is a Dave Ramsey quote, right? Live how no one else is living now so you can live like no one else later. Something to that effect, right? And it's like,
classic Dave, classic.
Yeah. I don't care if I don't know anybody else having a budget. I'm going to have one, and I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to follow it, and I'm going to be strict with it. And if someone asks me to go out and I don't have the money, sorry, I can't go out, right? Yeah. So have a budget. The basics of budgeting from a Christian perspective, I would say you give 10%, you save 10%, and you spend 80%. That's like the most basic budget, I could say. Yeah. For someone that was just starting out. And if your expenses are over that 80, then you gotta figure out how to make more money, or you gotta figure out how to lower those expenses.
Yeah. No, that's good. I didn't prep you for this one, but that's okay. What are your thoughts on debt? So we talked about Dave Ramsey.
I'm actually
really curious about this. Yeah. Yeah.
We mentioned Dave Ramsey a few times, right? On this episode. And Dave Ramsey is an expert financial advisor, but he's most well known for avoiding debt, right? Mm-hmm. If you need to buy a car, you save up cash and you buy that car outright with cash, right? To use the car, right? You're not saving $40,000 to go, right? But maybe some people are if they got the right income. Yeah. But you are avoiding debt at all costs, right? If you got a mortgage, he wants you to work towards paying off that mortgage. If you got any sort of loan debt, he wants you to pay off that loan debt. If you got any sort of credit card debt, he has some of the best practices that aren't just his principles. These are well-known principles, but he really leads the financial world in spearheading, get rid of that debt. And here are a few ways that you can tackle that debt. And so we're not going to get into the specifics on how to handle debt. But if you are struggling with debt, Dave Ramsey is awesome. Like, I advocate for his principles significantly if you are trying to overcome debt. Now, there are some things with Dave that I don't 100% agree on, but it's because I'm in a sound financial place.
You blasphemer. You blasphemer.
Good. If I was somebody struggling with debt, Dave would be my boy, right?
Yeah.
And if you are somebody struggling with debt, he should be your boy, right? Especially what we would call bad debt. I wouldn't consider a mortgage bad debt. Dave, it would, I don't know that he would call it bad debt because I don't listen to him often, so I don't know his terminology, but he would want you to pay it off. Where there's I would say there's alternative approaches to carrying a mortgage, especially if you have a low interest rate and you can take the additional money that Dave would be telling you to, pay extra on your mortgage to pay it off. But you could be putting that money into the stock market, right? And really just some basic, Roth IRA type stuff. I know I'm throwing out a lot of language here that viewers might not know, but you might be able to make money on investments at a higher rate than the benefit of paying off the mortgage. So there's different approaches to that people would disagree with Dave about. And so it's weird when you say, well, what's your feelings on debt? Something like a mortgage, I would say, is a good type of debt. That's not bad, again, especially if you have a low rate. Car payments, it's hit or miss. It really depends. I think, I wouldn't recommend going and get a car that is more than you can afford. That's going to give you a payment that's more than you can afford. There's certain principles that you can go online and search, like based on my income, how much of a car payment can I really justify having? So provided you've practiced sound wisdom on things like a car payment, I'm okay with a car payment. It is fantastic not to have car payments. Right now we have 2 vehicles. We only have a payment on one of them. It's fantastic not having to make payments on a vehicle. So if you can avoid car payments, yes and amen to that. But if you're in a situation where you need a vehicle, you live in the suburbs, you commute, and maybe practice some of Dave's principles, buy used, buy older. If you can pay cash, pay cash. If you need to take a small loan, I'm not going to trash you for that. Now, there's other really bad types of debt. Credit card debt is probably the number one most bad debt out there. 49% of Americans carry credit card debt, and that will destroy you. And so I credit cards is a unique topic, and I'm definitely someone that's pro credit cards. Dave Ramsey and others would be anti credit card. And all the reasons they would be anti credit card, I actually would agree with those principles. Many of them, again, is because Dave's preaching to a person that is in a bad financial spot. Typically, he's talking to someone who is bad with money, can't control their spending habits. And giving a credit card to someone who's bad with money is like giving alcohol to an alcoholic. It is not going to mix well,
It's really good.
So but if you are a sound person with finances, you got a budget, you can follow it. You're not spending money that you don't have. You're not making stupid purchases. I think there can be some advantages to having a credit card in your wallet, but that's a different thing. Your question was, what do I think about debt? And I would say it depends on the type of debt. And if it's credit card debt, you got to tackle that in any way possible. And I'd recommend find Dave Ramsey, go through his financial peace course, tackle that debt so that it doesn't have to be a burden. It won't have to be like a yoke around your neck. just dragging you down. And so that, again, you can live free, you know?
Yeah. 100%. I actually remember, was it last year or 2 years ago that we took a Ramsey course, the FPU.
I think it was 2 years ago.
And that was like so we could be equipped within the church to teach it to other people.
Right.
And so 100%, like a lot of the philosophies you and I would both agree with.
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing you saying is you're like all in on those principles if you're somebody who struggles. Yeah. If you're somebody who can apply wisdom, it's actually not a bad idea to build up credit, right? But what I know about you is while you have credit cards, right? Mm-hmm. You use them, but you pay them off every single month. So it's not building and accruing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Debt can destroy you 100%. Yeah. So if you can't control your finances, try to avoid debt, the bad types of debt. Of course, again, if you want to buy a house, you're going to have to get a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And the American system runs on credit. So there is this reality that you have to play into the system a little bit, but you will earn good credit through paying off your mortgage, through paying rent on time, through paying a car payment. So you don't necessarily need credit cards in order to build positive credit. Yeah. But it can help, you know?
Yep.
But I would only recommend credit cards to somebody that is sound financially. Even some people say that credit cards should be like your emergency, and that is not right. Like credit cards are not meant for emergencies. The thing that's meant for emergencies should be an emergency fund that you have set up on the side and are continually funding into, which is super hard. And even for me, I think right now in our savings account, I think Katie and I could cover about 3 months worth of expenses if we both lost our job right now. That is my emergency savings fund. I would like that to get to 6 months because I know people that have lost their job and they're out of job for 3, 6, 12 months. Right. So it is so important to build up an emergency fund. That is kind of a few steps down the road in Dave Ramsey's financial peace university that you and I went through. But it's a step. That is where your emergency spending should come out of. A credit card shouldn't be used for emergency spending. Credit cards, I think, for me, they've been a thing that have allowed me to take advantage of like points because there's credit card points and miles and all that. And it allows Katie and I to take some trips that we wouldn't otherwise. But even
Which
Dave,
is great.
It is great. But even someone like Dave Ramsey would say that what I'm doing is not wise because he would argue that it's prompting me to spend money that I wouldn't spend otherwise. And there's probably some truth in that, right? Because when I earn points and miles and I'm like, oh, we have enough to go to Europe and we go to Europe, then I'm going to spend an additional few $1,000s on some things in Europe. He's probably right. I probably wouldn't have spent a few $1,000s if we just went to Myrtle Beach on a beach vacation. But Dave, I got to go to Europe and I also budgeted to spend that few $1,000s. I'm covering my bases. So Dave, I don't think Dave would be mad at me. The challenge is not everyone is budgeting to spend that $3,000 in Europe. They get the miles to go there and then they spend money they don't have. And that would be Dave's point.
This is all be wise with the money that you do have. I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is, if you said if you don't have money for something you budgeted, you're just going to tell somebody, no, I can't do that thing. I actually want to talk about the spiritual implication of that and the spiritual discipline of that. Because isn't that kind of, if we're believers here, right? Like we follow Jesus. Isn't that kind of what we need to develop in every aspect of our lives? And so money is giving us the opportunity to say no to the immediate, to say yes to something in the long term that we desire more. You want to speak to that?
Yeah. That self-control, right? That's self-control in there. Just the ability to say no in different areas of your life is a really difficult thing. When it comes to money, I often live in this world that most people don't have a money earning problem. They have a money spending problem. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you do actually need to make more income. But typically, most people have a spending problem. And it's because they can't say no. It's because they don't know how to be wise with their spending, right? Like Paul says in Ephesians, don't be careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, right? Like, so there's this thing about wisdom and making sure that you can make sound choices every single day. But the reason that like I can say no to spending in a moment is because I thought ahead to this moment. I started before this month even started. I already knew how much money I was coming into this month with, and I already projected how much I was going to be spending this month. And even like at the beginning of the month, I might have to say no to some things because I know at the end of the month I got something on my calendar that I know is going to be an expensive thing, right? So it's in order to say no in the moment, you have to prepare for that moment. Like you have to be put into the work behind the scenes, so that when you get into the fire of that moment and you have a bunch of friends saying, hey, let's go out to eat, you can still say yes to go out to eat, but you're sitting there and drinking water. You're hanging out. You know what I mean? So there's something about preparing yourself behind the scenes, and we could use that same philosophy for every area of our life, right? Like if I'm gonna say no, so I don't go too far, sexually with my boyfriend, girlfriend, it's because behind the scenes, I've made some decisions about who I am and what I want to be in my future marriage and future relationships. So when I get into the heat of the moment, I can have the strength I need to say no. Right. So that is wisdom that can be applied to any area, but, man, finances and money are just so deadly and tempting to overspend because it feeds our soul. It's a dopamine hit, right? Like I'm buying something that I really want right now. It's going to make me happy right now.
Yeah. Those shoes. Come on,
man. We love to spend money, man. We love to spend money.
Yeah. That's really great. What I'm giving you questions I didn't even prep you for, but that's okay. So for somebody listening who maybe they're like newer to the idea of budgeting, or maybe newer to faith from a Christian angle, what biblical foundation would you lay? Like if you had to say whether it's just the Bible says this about stewarding or whatever, like
I got you. Jesus said no one can serve two masters. Like you can't serve God and money, right? He literally said that. Jesus talked about money more than he talked about anything else. I think there's something. Me and you are doing a money series later this year. We got to look this up. But I think there's something like 5,000 verses or something absurd about money in the Bible. And it's like 3 times as many verses about that as there is about prayer and faith. Like it's something like so ridiculous. Like, because God knows that money loves to capture our hearts. Money, the temptation to serve money will constantly push up against your desire to serve God. You will want to worship at the altar of money. Like that will be the number one thing that you will chase after if you're in this world, if you are not careful. And money is not the end all be all things. I'm also not saying that money is bad, right? Because the Bible says, it doesn't say money is evil. It says the love of money is evil.
That's right. That's right.
And so again, it's the same thing Jesus is saying. Like you cannot worship money. He is the ultimate thing that you worship. He should be your focus. And man, when God calls us to give, and when we ask people to give in church all the time, man, it's like that's because God isn't after their money; He's after their heart, right? And how we spend our money is like the greatest indicator of where our heart is in relation to our Heavenly Father, and how much we trust Him, and how much we worship Him. And I don't actually worship this money. I don't actually worship this thing. So, man, it will constantly be trying to take your faith down and trying to be the number one thing in your life. And so, for a person of faith, it's like, man, how can I position myself so that God is the number one thing in my life? That He's the thing that I devote everything about my life, including finances, to. And then I would say, like, okay, well, what does God say about money, right? And how does He say to spend it? And how does He, how does He talk about generosity, right? And live a generous life. Like that's where I think it would go. So you have to keep God first. Don't worship money. You can't serve two masters, Jesus said. So serve Him, and then the stuff with money will fall into place. Should.
Thanks for sharing that. For somebody who may be listening and they're like, wow, Ed's really got it all together. Look at this guy. As I'm sure everybody is. And they're just feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind, right? Like, I don't even know where to begin, and how do I take the first step? What would you say to that person who's feeling really discouraged with their financial state?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really start taking financial literacy seriously until I was about 18. My parents didn't harm me in teaching me about finances, but I don't know that they like totally advanced me either. So I was really middle ground around 18. I had I was going into college. I was accumulating college debt, but my parents helped me out with college. So that was a huge blessing.
Yeah.
But at 18, I would say some people, this is going to young leaders, and I think you have high schoolers thinking like, man, how can I understand money well right now? Or someone 18 to 25 feeling like I'm behind the eight ball. And the truth is you're not. Like even if you got someone listening to this who's 35, 45, like you can still rectify your financial self to set yourself up for success at the end of your life. So many times you can hear really terrible stories about the elderly now feeling like they don't have enough money for the end of their life. And people are living a lot longer now. Like, we need more money to survive in retirement. So like, you have your whole life to get right with money and set yourself up for future success. So it's never too late. I would just start today. Wherever you're at right now, start today. And I would say the very first thing that I would do, like if I was just starting out, is I would go into my bank account, my online bank, and I would look back over probably the last like 3 months. And I'd say, okay, last month, how much did I make? How much did I spend? The month before, how much I make? How much I spend? The month before, how much I make? How much I spend? I try to organize my expenses. All right, I know I'm spending this on groceries every month. I know I'm spending this on a car payment. I know I'm spending this on a mortgage. Like, start to figure out like those expenses that are locked in, guaranteed, not changing, automatically come out, utilities, that sort of thing. Then I'd add up my voluntary expenses, right? Yeah. And I'd start to figure out, okay, how much am I really doing there? And, if those expenses are over what I'm bringing in, then this upcoming month, I'm going to set a goal to spend under that amount, right? Or spend what I can. So, I would say the very first thing is look back 1 to 3 months if you can, because that's going to give you some clarity, for what you're doing. But for someone that really has a little bit of understanding of what they make and what they spend, I would challenge you over the next year, track every expense for one whole year. Because there are annual expenses, right? Yeah, I got to pay taxes at a certain point, right? I got to pay my car registration at a certain point. There's things that hit annually that you also need to be aware of when those are going to hit, so that you're appropriately planning for that. So you really want to know. You really want to have an understanding of what is my income over a year, what are my expenses over the year, how does that break down month to month. So but look back 3 months and then try and do a running tally for about 12 months so that you can set yourself up for future success.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So Kendall and I, my wife, who obviously but we have been actually doing exactly what you just said. And it's funny because like, especially I feel like as young people, it's so easy to pick up like this subscription, that subscription, like these kind of things. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, I have a Spotify account and you have a Spotify account, right? And especially if you're like newly married, you probably run into some of that stuff. And we haven't been, doing crazy wild things with money, but it's really funny whenever you sit down and actually do what you're saying and pull up the account and say, oh, wait, we can cancel this and we don't need this. And I spent way too much on coffee this month, right? And for us, it's kind of become, because you said earlier, it can almost feel awkward in a marriage. I think if you do it healthily, like we actually have a lot of fun with it to where we're like, oh, it's almost like a little game, and we know we want to be able to do this. And so we're having fun kind of working towards that together. And so I think if you even position it right, I would just tell people it doesn't need to be this like super intense, negative experience. It can actually be a lot of fun and like a game. But Kendall's also the best, so makes it easy, right?
That's a really incredible testimony, I think, from you guys. I would say for the most part, my experience is most couples have one person that's really into managing money and one person that's really bad, right? And so if you're the person listening to this and you're really bad and you got a spouse or a significant other that's really good, do not fight them. That person tends to be the biggest headache for the other significant other who's trying to manage well, who's trying to steward things well, and this person keeps misspending. And maybe surprise them and go to them and say, hey, what's our budget? Can we make a budget? Can you actually tell me what to spend so I don't overspend? But if you're the person listening to this and you are the financial planner, then instead of not talking about it in your marriage and then spending happens however you want, that's ultimately going to lead to an awkward conversation later when you realize you don't have the money you need to pay for the things you need. So I would suggest voluntarily have an awkward conversation now about how much you're making, how much you need to spend to save yourself from a more difficult, dangerous, awkward conversation later.
That's really great. So as we kind of unwind here and wrap up, a question I kind of want to leave us on, because this is obviously a leadership conversation too. And you're a leader, right? You're the lead pastor at the church, and I'm your humble servant there. And the Lord's servant. Either way, we're leaders, right? And you're a leader. So how does learning to navigate finances impact your ability to lead and your leadership? So both individually and corporately. What's that look like?
Yeah, that's really good. I would say far too many people, they don't have their finances order, and finances tend to be a burden for them. And it tends to be a drain on their life. It's like I think money is the number one, like when people get pulled on the number one stress thing in your life, money is typically one or two. Yeah. And so if you want to lead well, like you want in any area of your life, me and you are in vocational ministry, but any area of your life, you want to lead well, you want to love people well, you want to be a good spouse, you want to be a good husband, you want to be a good parent, you want to be a good employee. If you can solve the money thing in your life, if you can control that narrative, it relieves so much stress out of your life and truly allows you to operate on a different level. Wow. Managing your money is not normal. It's an abnormal practice. Most people let their money manage them, right? And if you can control the narrative of money in your life, you're already ahead of like 50% of people in this world, maybe more. Again, 50% carry credit card debt. So it's like, if we actually polled how many people actually have a budget, if you can get ahead, I really believe you're setting yourself up for success more than other people, right? And so it just takes care of things. We were talking about being able to say no or yes to going out to dinner with somebody. I never want to be in a position where I have to say no. Sometimes I do. But I really want to be in a situation where I could go out with anybody I need to at any time. If I need to pass them, if I need to leave them, if I want to pick up a tab because I'm going out to somebody, going out to meet someone for coffee or dinner or whatever, I always want to be in a position to do that. I'm not. Sometimes I'm not, but I would like to be. Like that's just who I want. I want that to be like a mark of my life, and I want to live life with generosity. Like I want that to be like a mark of who I am, and people know that I want people to think that I'm a generous person, and that's because our God was a generous God, and I want to look like Jesus in my life, right? So I want to make sure that everything about my life looks like Him, and that includes how generous I am towards others. So solve this issue. Don't let it pass by, because if you can solve this, man, it takes care of arguably the number one stressful thing in people's lives. And it allows you to hopefully, operate in freedom, operate in strength, operate in, patience and self-control, as you mentioned earlier. And allows you to tackle other things in life. We got a lot of other things to worry about in this world. And I don't want to have to worry about money. I want to, if I can take care of money, man, then I can really worry about how to be a good husband. You know, like I'd rather spend my time focusing on that.
Yeah.
How to be a good pastor, right? You know, man, those things are a lot more fun to focus on. So yeah, I want to take care of the money thing so I can focus on other things.
It's really cool. Thanks for sharing all that. So valuable. You mentioned, and this is a fun question. You mentioned that you and Katie love to travel. And where's your favorite place you've ever traveled?
Italy by far. We got to go to Europe for our 10-year anniversary, and it was, you know, everything we dreamed of and more. And we went to Italy and Paris, Rome, Paris, London, which is kind of 3 big, you know, European cities. Yeah. And but everything about our trip, like the best food, the best vibe, just everything, the best places we got to see, all of it was in Italy. So we definitely want to go back. And we have a lot of other places around the world we want to get to too. But that might be cliche. I feel like everyone loves Italy, but man, we went there and it just did not disappoint. Like it blew us away in every respect. Yeah.
Well, if you're looking to bring along another couple next time, you just let us know.
Start budgeting right now, man.
There you go. If you're watching this and you're wondering, well, how do you budget to go to Italy? It's actually really interesting the way that Ed got there, and it has to do with credit cards, correct, Ed?
It is.
And so, Ed, plug your channel. If you're maybe intrigued and you're like, this guy talked about credit cards, but I'm kind of confused. Where can I hear more? Yeah. What is your channel where people can hear more and listen more to how you manage that?
Yeah, you know what's so funny is I haven't updated in a while, but
this is my way to incentivize you.
I know, incentivize me. If you go on YouTube and search Ed Newell credit cards, you will find my channel. And my biggest video is about how we got to Europe using credit cards, and it's a pretty advanced video for using credit card points and miles. But I got a lot of other videos on my channel that are a lot easier to follow, and that's another tier for people that are financially sound. And so again, if you don't have your finances in order, do not go to my YouTube channel.
Don't even look at it.
Don't even look at it. Don't even think about it. If you have a budget, you follow a budget, you aren't tempted to spend money you don't have, then go to my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, Ed Newell credit cards. You will find it. Yeah.
I love it so much. Thanks so much for your time. Any parting words?
Yeah. The only practical thing I would say is, get a budgeting app. You know, if you're with, especially a spouse, there's a budget called You Need a Budget. That's a really popular one. We use Every Dollar, which is Dave Ramsey's budgeting app. Yeah. And so our monthly budget is in there, and every expense that Katie and I do, we have to track it in the app. Just like your employer probably makes you track expenses as well. Yeah. We track every expense as a married couple, and it goes into this thing. And so that's how we do it. But in order to get there, we had to sit down and actually talk about it again. So get a budgeting app. It's going to help you a lot.
Come on. I love it. Ed, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this. You're amazing, and I'm sure everybody appreciated. So light up those comments. Let Ed know how much you love him and how great he was. And friends, we will see you back here next week. We love you. See ya.